For the audience is listening, my name's Ed Leamer. I've been with the UCLA Anderson Forecast for a long time, 40 years? And we're celebrating the 70th anniversary. So it's been existing for a very long time. It's a great honor for me and for the forecast to be able to have Governor Jerry Brown participating in this 70th anniversary. If I had enough time, I would remind you of all the great things that Jerry Brown has done for Californians, but I don't have, we have 10 minutes in total. So what I'm going to do is recommend you read this book, The Browns of California, because it has a huge amount of information about Jerry and the other Browns as well, Pat and his sister Kathleen. Yeah. So with that as my introduction of Jerry Brown, whom you already know, I want to bring to you the fact that he served 2 terms as a governor of California from 1975 to 83, and a second term from 2011 to 2019. And these 2 periods of time are totally different in terms of how the economy behaved and how forecasting should have gone. And I wondered what the governor will have to say about how the forecast operated differently during these 2 period times and how it had an impact on decision making. And as a way of introducing this, what you see in front of you is on the left-hand side, California population. The green areas represent the periods of time when Jerry Brown was governor of California. The left-hand side axis measures thousands of people. It starts at 10,000 to 10 million people, up to the top is 50 million. That scale is a log scale. And what happens, the log scale turns constant rates of growth into straight lines. So you can see that in that first era, when Jerry Brown was governor, from 73 to 82, I believe, the growth rate of the California population was 2.1%. While in his second era, it was not growing so much. It was only 0.6%. And then perhaps more importantly, the California tax revenue was growing at 10% during that era. And it continued at 10% until about 1990. And then it turned into half that rate, was 5%. So if you're thinking of, for example, funding retirement, back in a 10% period, you could give away a lot of retirement benefits. With the only 5%, you got to be a lot more careful about the commitments that you make in the future. So that's my question, the extent to which Sacramento is thinking about these as underlying drivers that will determine the budget situation going forward. And I mentioned the 1990s, that's when Pete Wilson took over as governor, and he had a heck of a hard time because the revenue didn't come at the rate that the legislature expected it. So secondly, you got to worry about recessions as well, because those are periods of high unemployment and typically degenerated cash flows. So I have a hard time there. And so this is a picture that has the greens are the 2 eras of Jerry Brown's governorship, and the red verticals represent the recessions. So you can see in that first episode that when Jerry was governor, that's where you had that huge Volcker created recession. Volcker was fighting inflation with high rates of interest, and he turned the US into a very serious recession. And I'm wondering, how does Sacramento deal with that? But in the second term, Governor Brown experienced a rather happy, joyful thing, because the unemployment rate, which is high when he first came over, became governor, was dropping dramatically. And he was smart enough to get out of the position of governor before COVID-19 hit and unemployment spiked up. So with that, as a way of introduction, I want to turn now to Jerry Brown's comments, starting first perhaps with his first episode from 1973 until 1982, when he was governor. Jerry, what do you have to say about this?
Well, I'd make one comment that if you look at the popularity of governors, the only governor, 2 governors since my father, I guess, 2 governors, ended up after 8 years as majority popular, over a majority. That was myself in my last go around as governor, ending in 2019, and George McMahon, who started in '83 and I guess he ended in '91. And when you compare these two popularity examples, they're matched by which governor was leaving when employment was still rising. And George McMahon had a very buoyant employment period for those 8 years. When my father left, they were headed for a recession, I think. Reagan, it looked like a recession. And when I left, it looked like a recession. McMahon, no. And Wilson had a recession, wasn't popular. Gray Davis got recalled. He faced a recession. And then Arnold, very popular, dropped below 20. So there's the first point I want to make is that governors get reputations. Usually they're not that popular because people get tired of them. But also just the structural changes in the economy erode public confidence. People associate the governor with either the good times or the bad times, even though, as you can tell from this chart, and if you read the Anderson Forecast, it's the governor, no matter Republican or Democrat, don't affect that. They're bouncing off or on the rise and fall of the economy. So I think that's an important point. In terms of, I guess you're asking me the difference. I always felt we're headed for a recession my last time. It never came. The expansion was as long as it ever was, never that long. It was a full, it was 1 year, the expansion when I was elected in 2010, and it kept right on going till I left in 2019. So that tends to create popularity. But it's not something I can change or anyone else can. So there it is. And in the first go around, I had built up a surplus because I thought we were going to have a deficit in 1974, which there was, the revenues were falling, but so I was saving money. But lo and behold, because the income tax is very progressive and it picks up changes in the economy favorably, that is, to the income tax, we amassed a $5 or $6 billion surplus, much to my surprise. And that then helped, didn't lead to it, but it helped foster, well, it did in one sense. The inflation on property values led to the tax revolt, Howard Jarvis, Prop 13. And then when that passed, we had to take the whole surplus and spend it transitioning to the lower tax environment. And then over time, people still blame Prop 13, but actually the various taxes have risen. And I would say we've absorbed Prop 13 with other taxes, and we're not an under-taxed state in any means. So
just a quick clarifier, I want to butt in here and ask the question. So you're saying that Proposition 13 was a consequence of the inflation of the 1970s, is that right?
Well, yeah, because the homes that people had I believe in 1970 or thereabouts, the average median home in LA County was 69,000. Okay, that started rising. As it rose, the fixed property tax rate generated more money, and all of a sudden, people's income tax doubled. So because the authorities didn't reduce the tax rate, they just let it absorb more and more money, and that meant people's tax bills got bigger and bigger. And over time, they felt a problem, and so they revolted, and that was Prop 13.
So is this something that affects us today that we have to worry about as well, with the inflation of home prices that's occurred?
We won't get the rising home values because people have Prop 13, so it only lets it go up 2% a year. But I do think the inflation, it was very powerful then, and it definitely, I think, motivated voters. And we're going back into inflation. I mean, the gas tax is high, food prices, all sorts of things are going up. So people notice that, and we'll see how. I don't know exactly how it works, but it generally is not favorable to the incumbent, or even Democrats who are associated more with spending than Republicans.
So to continue the thought that I want to have discussed is to what extent does this legislature require forecasts in order to make decisions? For an obvious one would be retirement planning. If you're going to give away a lot of retirement benefits to the employees of the state, you better be sure that you have cash flow that's going to support that commitment.
Okay, so Edward, let's not mix up two things. There's the budget, and the budget is a matter of revenue over projected costs. And revenue does come from forecasts. And the state meets in December, and they bring all you people and other forecasters, and they set a revenue number based on your forecast. And that's the way it works. The forecast, of course, can change. Now, go over to the pension side, the $400 billion of public pensions in California. That functions, well, I mean, how well they do in the stock market. Last year, they got a -6 on the public employees retirement system. Before that, they'd grown, I think, 17%. That's a roller coaster, but you can't cut pensions. I did do a pension reform. We cut back the benefits by about a third, but still it's there. And the pension depends on investments, Wall Street, various kinds of funds that the pension people invest in. But I don't think they pay a lot of attention to forecasts. They're trying to get the biggest return, and they have to get. It was over 7. Now it's about 6.9. They got to get 6.9. If they don't, the pensions they have each year, they say, well, it's unfunded. You know, it's 80% funded. So then they have to, if they don't get it from the market, they have to go raise the rates from either the employer, which could be all the cities in most of the cities in California, and the state, or the employee, or both, and or they just let the unfunded liability build up, which is
or the taxpayers can end up holding that burden.
Yeah,
that's
but
true.
They don't. The
that's
taxpayers don't come in. The taxpayers, that hits more at the local government.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Municipalities have that problem.
The municipalities, because PERS assigns them contribution levels, and if the market is not throwing off enough return, then they're going to send a bill out, and the cities will have to raise. They'll have to. They don't raise taxes. They cut things. They have a hard time raising taxes. So it's just a big squeeze. The pensions is really a parallel universe, and I think it's more delayed in the impact. And by the way, they don't sit around Sacramento reading forecasts. They listen to the governor's budget, and they look for optimistic things they want to spend. The government is in business not to save money, to spend money. There are 120 legislators, and some want to reduce taxes, and that takes away money from the state, and many want to spend things. And out of 120, you're going to get dozens of people who want stuff, who want to vote for spending. So it's a tremendous pressure, and they don't look at it as spending. They look at it as investing and meeting needs. The word need is a very fluid concept. Yeah, it's like a balloon. You can expand it, and it just can get bigger and bigger. And need, the way I used to say it is, desires are first. You have desires. Then those desires are converted into a need. And then that need is recognized in some kind of law, or maybe a right. If you have a need, then it becomes a right to get that need satisfied. And then if you have a right, then somebody's got to pass a law, or they bring a lawsuit, and that need gets validated by state or the city spending money, or the school district. So that's the name of the game. Desires, needs, rights, laws, lawsuits, more spending bills. That's
I have the impression
it works.
I have impression that the second Governor Brown, his second term, was really rather instinctively frugal and was trying to prevent the excessive spending that the legislature wanted to conduct. Was that an incorrect way of describing you?
Well, I was very frugal. At least I tried to be my first 8 years. That's why we had the Speaker of the Assembly, Jesse Unruh, or the former Speaker, called an obscene surplus. I always thought the deficit was obscene. But then when we finally got a good surplus, even that was vilified and stigmatized by the political class. And because they think money should be spent. I get the point. But I tried to be frugal, but I can tell you, government operates by mood. What is the public mood? What are the memes? What are the context? It's like a wave. People are all, I'm mixing my metaphors, but everybody tends to think a certain way, or the Democrats think a certain way, and things become not only plausible, they become urgent, and now you got to spend them. So thinking there is a prudent forecaster, or even a person who wants to worry about it, it's you got to be there to experience it. I would just say I was born in 1938. My parents came through the Depression pretty well, but I grew up during World War II. Things were rationed. Butter was rationed. Gasoline was rationed. Meat was rationed. We didn't have a lot of stuff. You didn't have stuff. I mean, we were nice middle class. Everything was comfortable, but you didn't go out to dinner. You didn't buy stuff all the time. And now, so I got kind of caught in the change of culture, in the credit culture, the spend and spend. I was brought up, we would call it frugal today, but it was just the way my family grew up. And people were not, you didn't see a lot of new things, a lot of new toys. In fact, during World War II, you never saw a new car. I mean, the new ones came out in 46, I think. So I spent 8 years never seeing a new car. You didn't see too many new houses either. So then after the war, things started building up. But I thought we were hitting an era of limits in the 70s. I even coined that phrase. We have to make choices, priorities. And I certainly didn't expect. And people accused me of being a no-growther. The Chamber of Commerce, the Round Table, they were attacking me. Brown wants to stop growth. And all of a sudden, the 80s, after this recession by Volcker, it all shot up. And more money, more people, more Silicon Valley emerged. So it was spend, invest, more toys, more stuff. And there it was. So now we get to my third and fourth governorship. It's a whole new ball game. The general fund was 25 billion, and now it's up to 200 billion. So it's a growth machine, but I've always thought it can't keep growing. And there's an economist from Northwestern called Robert Gordon.
Sure.
And he wrote a whole book, and he talked about the headwinds. And he said the next couple of decades, growth will be half of what it was the last few decades. Well, that's pretty serious for pension funds. It's pretty serious for this need-based politics. And I would say that's where your forecasting will come in here. Is that the world we're entering in? I've been waiting for this world since the day I ran in 1974. I thought we were going to have, more stringency, but I was refuted by a buoyant, growing population, innovation, technology, whatever. And now, though, maybe the chickens finally have come home to roost.
Well, it's the chickens are like humans that can only see a few hours into the future. The question is whether is there anything that we can do politically that looks ahead a couple of decades and make sure that we're formulating policies that are appropriate to that kind of future? In particular, what about climate change?
Well, climate change is a big one. I was just reading in the San Francisco Chronicle today about the port of San Francisco and the Army Corps of Engineers planning what kind of barriers and locks, like dams and things. They're trying to bolster the seashore and the bay. And as you know, or may not know, a good part of San Francisco is on fill. In fact, the whole University of California campus, I think, is on somewhat marginal land, and the financial district. All this was filled in. Well, with the bay rising, that water may be coming back, so they're going to have to build barriers. And this can cost many billions, probably tens of billions. So how bad, when to do what? There's a lot of plotting to do. Same thing, by the way, another one, there is a person who's a climate scientist, University of San Diego, and he's been telling me, for the last couple of years, insurance will become unaffordable because the fires are going to be burning. Already 40% of the forests have burned. The whole 100% are going to burn, and not too many years into the future. And home insurance is not going to be that available, particularly where people live near the rural urban interface. So that's a problem. how people are going to buy home insurance. So the climate is going to bring a lot of disruption. And then you get climate disruption by way of flooding. So you're going to get the fires. LA is going to have fires. Malibu is going to have fires. Orange County, Riverside. So we're in for a real rock and roll here. And it calls for prudence and planning. But I would say those are not qualities that ordinarily characterize winning campaigns.
All right, that's a good way to end it up. Prudence and planning. That's the way of thinking about looking into the future. That is, say, forecasting and taking advantage of what you see. Do you have anything more you want to talk about in terms of the role that forecasts play in Sacramento, or shall we finish up here?
Well, I don't think forecasts play a big role. Needs play a role. Constituencies, organized interest groups that have lobbyists, that have members. You know, there's, I don't know, 1,000 lobbyists, maybe a few hundred that are powerful, representing unions, teachers, lawyers, oil companies, tech companies, you name it. They're all up there, and they get paid for delivering. And sometimes the delivery is to block a law, but often it's to create a new spending category. So I would say that the politicians are not reading the Anderson Forecast. They should send them a copy and send it to the lobbyists. But we're in the world where politics is, what have you done for me lately? And then when the disaster hits, the response is what we call, or what I call, blame management. If you can't solve the problem, find someone to credibly blame. And that way you kind of skate down the lane, maintain your position. So there it is.
You've thankfully absolved the forecasts of any causally bad effects, because they have no effects at all in Sacramento, as you've said.
Well, you know, I mean, they do forecasting sets the revenue. If the revenue is lower, then they do follow that, and they avoid spending. So I would say the forecast does dampen the exuberance and the spending proclivity. So if I didn't quite put it the way I am now, that's an accurate fact. The revenue that Anderson puts out, along with others, feeds into the definition of revenue. And what the revenue number is when it comes out in January, that is the number that spending proposals are weighed against. And they can't create a deficit ahead of time. And they won't.
That's only a 1-year forecast. Right? And I'm saying that we ought to have something like a 10-year forecast for the state of California.
Well, we do have a 5-year budget, and we started that. I started that in my last time as governor, and that's a good instrument. I'm just saying, it's like you sober professors are up against hungry tigers. That would be my metaphor for fitting in your deliberative forecast with the excitability and the animal spirits that roam the halls of the state capitol.
So in conclusion, I think we've revealed that Jerry Brown as governor was both frugal and forward-looking. And I thank you very much for participating in this today.
Okay, well, I hope I tried to be, but you know, it's a hazardous business, but it's not a bad. It's not a great system, but it's better than most of the other ones on offer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.